For 8 long years, Brad Pitt said nothing. Not a word, not a defense, not even a hint of how the collapse of his family had reshaped his life. While headlines argue for him or against him, he simply disappeared into silence, letting the world assume whatever it wanted. But in 2025, after years buried under legal battles, fractured relationships, and a $500 million war over Chateau Miraval, Brad Pitt finally allowed himself to speak. And what he revealed was not anger or retaliation, but the quiet truth of a man who had been living in the shadow of the most painful chapter of his life, the beginning of a storm. When Brad Pitt first crossed paths with Angelina Jolie in 2003 on the set of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, neither of them could have imagined the chain of events that would follow. At the time, Brad was still married to Jennifer Aniston, and Angelina had just ended her marriage to Billy Bob Thornton. Their chemistry on set drew intense media attention, turning every glance, every interview, and every moment into tabloid speculation. By 2005, when Brad and Jennifer finalized their divorce, the world had already constructed a narrative. And when Brad was photographed with Angelina and her son Maddox in Kenya, that narrative exploded into something much larger than any of them could control. Over the next decade, Brad and Angelina built a family that captivated the entire world. They adopted Maddox from Cambodia, Zahara from Ethiopia, and Pax from Vietnam before welcoming 3 biological children, Shiloh in 2006 and twins Knox and Vivian in 2008. Their home became a symbol of diversity and unity, and the media labeled them Hollywood's clear-throat model global family. But what outsiders saw as perfection was behind closed doors increasingly fragile. Between the demands of fame, the pressures of raising 6 children across multiple continents, and the constant spotlight, the cracks began to show long before they were visible to the public. By 2008, Brad and Angelina had purchased Chamarral for $28 million, a peaceful French estate that served as both a family refuge and the birthplace of their highly successful Maral wine brand. They lived there for 6 years, raising their children and nurturing the vineyard. In 2014, they held a quiet wedding on the property, with only close friends and their children present. For a fleeting moment, it seemed like a rare moment of stability in a turbulent world. But just 2 years later, everything collapsed. Angelina filed for divorce in September 2016, citing irreconcilable differences, and what had once been a united family swiftly became the center of one of the most painful separations Hollywood had ever seen. The plane incident and the collapse of the family. The breaking point came just days before Angelina filed for divorce. On a private flight from France to the United States in September 2016, an incident occurred that would ignite an international media firestorm and redefine how the world viewed Brad Pitt as a father. According to documents later submitted by Angelina's legal team, Brad had been drinking on the plane, and a verbal argument escalated into what she described as physical aggression. Their eldest son, Maddox, then 15, attempted to intervene. What happened next remains disputed, but Angelina claimed Brad grabbed Maddox by the neck during the confrontation. Sources close to Brad strongly denied the specific detail. Yet, the accusation alone was enough to trigger federal involvement. Because the incident took place in international airspace, the FBI launched an immediate investigation. Simultaneously, the Los Angeles Department of Child and Family Services began its own inquiry into the children's safety. For several weeks, Brad's life became a blur of interviews, evaluations, and supervised visits. Both agencies eventually concluded that there was insufficient evidence to pursue criminal charges. Angelina did not push the case further, but by the time the investigations ended, the damage had already been done. His reputation had been shattered in the media, and the fragile trust within the family had ruptured beyond repair. In the months that followed, a temporary court order gave Angelina primary custody of all 6 children. Brad was granted visitation, but under strict supervision. It was a decision intended to protect the children. Yet, it marked the beginning of an 8-year custody battle that would take profound emotional toll on every member of the family. What had once been a united household now existed in fragments, with public speculation growing louder and harsher by the day. Despite the investigations clearing him of criminal wrongdoing, Brad fell into a deep silence that would last for years. He later admitted that he turned to sobriety in 2016, recognizing that his behavior on that flight had become a turning point, not just legally, But emotionally, the family that had once stood together on red carpets was now divided by resentment, distance, and unspoken pain. The children turned away. As the custody battle stretched from months into years, the deepest wounds didn't come from courtrooms or headlines. They came from Brad's growing distance from the 6 children he once carried across red carpets. Maddox, the eldest, was the first to pull away. By 2021, he testified in court with statements described as not favorable to Brad. And according to reports, he privately expressed that he no longer considered Brad his father. Though Angelina never confirmed it publicly, leaked documents suggested that Maddox had explored legally changing his name to Maddox Jolie, a symbolic severing of the bond that had defined Brad's earliest years of fatherhood. Pax, now an adult as well, reacted even more intensely. In 2020, he posted a message on his private Instagram account calling Brad awful person, claiming the children trembled whenever he entered the room. Though the post was deleted quickly, its content spread across the internet and painted a picture of emotional wounds that had been present for years. By 2023 and 2024, PX faced 2 traffic-related incidents that reportedly led to emotional instability, prompting close monitoring at home. Observers noted that the weight of the family conflict had taken its toll on him in ways far from the public eye. Then came Shiloh, the child once seen as a living symbol of Brad and Angelina's love. In May 2024, she filed to remove Pitt from her name and adopt Shiloh Jolie, a decision approved by the court in August that year. Her legal representative stated that the change came after a series of personal events, and international outlets described it as the clearest sign of where her loyalty lay. By 2024, Vivian was credited as Vivian Jolie while working alongside her mother on the Broadway production The Outsiders. Knox, still a minor, remained shielded from public scrutiny, but even he had not been seen publicly with Brad for years. Through all of this, Brad remained silent, not once addressing the accusations from his children. According to sources close to his legal team, he repeatedly requested family therapy sessions, some of which did take place under professional supervision, but none lasted long. The emotional distance had grown too large, and the once close-knit family had become a constellation of individuals moving further and further apart, each carrying their own version of the truth. If the emotional battles tore the family apart, the financial war turned their separation into one of the most complex legal conflicts Hollywood had ever seen. Chateau Moral, once the quiet French estate where they exchanged vows in 2014, became the epicenter of years of litigation. After the divorce filing in 2016, Brad initially maintained 60% ownership through his company Mondo Bongo, while Angelina held 40%. Later, he transferred 10% to her, so they could share it equally as husband and wife. For a time, Miraval symbolized unity, but after marriage collapsed, it became a battlefield. In 2021, Angelina sold her entire stake to Tenet Dello, owned by Russian billionaire Yuri Shefler, without informing Brad. He had long opposed working with Stoli Group, and according to his lawsuit filed in early 2022, they had a verbal agreement requiring written consent before either party sold their shares. Brad's team described Angelina's sale as deliberately hostile, accusing her of attempting to damage Miraval's operations and his ability to run the business. Angelina countered immediately. She argued Brad had refused to buy her out unless she signed a sweeping NDA designed, in her words, to silence her about the events that led to the divorce. By late 2023, the conflict escalated further. Newly filed communications showed Angelina's lawyers arguing that Brad was responsible for the burdensome document production because he was suing her for $35 million in damages, alleging harm to Miraval's business. Brad's team insisted Angelina was withholding key documents under attorney-client privilege, claiming she was abusing the privilege to bury critical evidence. Angelina responded in her own filings that she had left Brad control and full residency of the family homes in Los Angeles and at Miraval after the split, hoping it would calm tensions during a traumatic period, only to face years of escalating legal pressure. By 2024, the winery dispute had grown into a complex international case involving Luxembourg corporate law, allegations of malice, and requests for over 22 contested documents. As the December 17th hearing approached, both sides accused each other of bad faith, What had once been a sanctuary for their family now stood as a monument to everything that went wrong. $500 million in property locked inside a war neither seemed willing to end. The silence breaks after 8 years. In May 2025, Brad Pitt did something he had avoided for nearly a decade. He finally spoke. On May 28th, he appeared on the cover of GQ, giving the first in-depth interview since Angelina filed for divorce back in 2016. For years, his only public presence had been silent paparazzi photos and carefully worded statements from lawyers. But in this interview, Brad confronted the end of his marriage, the legal wars, and the distance between him and his children with a tone that was calm, almost numb. He confirmed that the divorce was legally finalized in December 2024, calling it simply something that needed to be done. And when asked why he kept quiet for so long, he answered bluntly, "I didn't see the point of speaking up when everything was chaos. Silence was the only way to avoid making things worse." For the first time, he publicly acknowledged a growing distance from his children. He didn't name them individually, didn't blame anyone, and didn't defend himself against their harsh words. Instead, he said quietly, "I'm always here if they need their father." It was not a plea or an apology, more like a resignation to reality he could no longer change. "No one gets married thinking their kids will turn their backs on them," he added, a sentence that lingered in the interview like a wound still bleeding. He avoided the plane incident, avoided recriminations, avoided accusing Angelina of anything. Instead, he said, "What happened happened." Brad also revealed that he had been fully sober since 2016, describing his life now as one focused on meditation, reading, quiet work, sculpting. He spoke like a man who had stepped back from the world, not defeated, but drained. A source close to Angelina told people that she felt relieved. Brad had finally acknowledged the divorce was over, and she had no interest in responding. Public reaction was divided. Some admired his restraint. Others said he still avoided accountability. But for Brad, the interview seemed less like a comeback and more like a closing chapter, a final attempt to reclaim his own voice in a story that had echoed without him for too long. After the storm, a different life begins. After years of conflict, public scrutiny, and courtroom battles, Brad Pitt now lives a life that looks nothing like the one he had when his family was still intact. Professionally, he remains a powerful figure in Hollywood. His production company, Plan B, continues to be one of the industry's strongest creative forces, responsible for Oscar-winning films like 12 Years a Slave, Moonlight, The Big Short, and Women Talking. In late 2025, Brad is expected to return to the screen with a high-profile Formula One film produced by Apple Studios, his first major leading role in years. The project, created in collaboration with Lewis Hamilton, has been described by industry insiders as Brad's most ambitious attempt to reinvent himself since Ad Astra. But outside the studio gates, his life is markedly quieter. Brad now spends most of his time at his estate in Santa Barbara, where he sculpts, gardens, reads, and keeps to himself. He has chosen privacy over fame, solitude over social headlines. In 2025, reports emerged that Brad is engaged to Swiss jewelry designer Enes de Ramon. They were first seen together in 2022, and by early 2025, multiple sources confirmed he had proposed with a private European ceremony planned for the end of the year. Though Brad has not spoken publicly about the engagement, those close to him say this is the first time since the divorce that he has allowed someone into his life emotionally. Meanwhile, Angelina Jolie continues to work globally as a filmmaker, producer, and humanitarian. Her daughter Vivian is now collaborating with her on the Broadway production The Outsiders, marking a new professional chapter for the mother-daughter duo. Angelina has stated that neither she nor the children have returned to Miraval since the painful events surrounding the divorce, and she remains focused entirely on their stability and well-being. Maddox lives in South Korea. Pac stays out of the public eye, and Shiloh and Vivian have dropped the Pitt surname. To Brad, these realities hang like a quiet ache, reminders of what remains broken despite the legal closure. After 8 years of silence, he spoke, but the distance between him and the children he once held so closely remains the one truth he cannot rewrite.